Breitling as a brand lays claim to a number of notable designs, but the definitive icon from Breitling has to be the Navitimer, an aviation-inspired chronograph dating back to the early 1950s. In this video, we'll review the new 41mm Navitimer B01, a refresh look for this model that looks back to the past in some ways and is with the times in others. But how does this one stack up against the busy competition in the luxury chronograph segment? Let's jump in. So before we jump into this video, if you know anything about the Navitimer, you know that it is a definitive pilot watch. But what are some other pilot watches out there? Check out our article looking at 27 of the top pilot watches for 2022. We have a wide list, wide variety, spanning all different categories of price. I'd recommend checking that out down below in the description. Dating back to 1884, as indicated on many of their dials, Breitling is a Swiss brand that has weathered the storms that have imperiled the Swiss watch industry over the past 138 years. While Breitling's history with chronograph mechanisms dates back to the late 1800s, it was the manually wound chronomat released in the early 1940s that ultimately paved the way for Breitling's modern chronograph collection. In 1952, after having developed a reputation among pilots for their ruggedness and reliability for sporty chronographs, the story goes that Breitling was approached by the AOPA, or the U.S. Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, with a request for a new chronograph specifically designed to meet their needs of pilots in the air. Breitling responded with a new watch that utilizes a slide rule bezel developed for early chronomat models and adapting it to calculate important flight information, including average speed, distance traveled, fuel consumption, rate of climb or descent, and conversions of miles to kilometers or nautical miles. The watch's name? The Navitimer. And it was a hit among the recreational, professional, and military pilots, but didn't become commercially widely available under the Breitling name until 1956 with the reference 806. In decades since, the Navitimer has remained in Breitling's collection in one form or another, with the watch receiving an automatic movement in 1969, and even quartz variants in the mid-1970s before the brand was sold in 1979. And Breitling was ultimately rescued by the Schneider family shortly thereafter, and the Navitimer returned to form in 1986, evolving to a more luxurious market position over the following decades. This considered, the Navitimer did undergo a bit of an identity crisis in the years to come, following trends of both size and appearance that didn't age as gracefully. With the selling of the brand in 2017 that led to new leadership, Breitling seems to have stabilized in a big way given their gradual rise in Swiss market share, a feat that I think begins with the recent product redesigns that have spanned nearly every collection. And in 2022, Breitling has made available a new lineup of Navitimers, now available in 46, 43, and 41mm case sizes. For the purpose of this video though, I want to focus on the 41mm variant. We have two different variations here, the silver dial and this eccentric mint green. So first we'll talk about these watches and just review them, and then at the end, give my final take on their market position. So beginning with a conversation on the case and wearing experience offered by the Navitimer, we have the claimed 41mm diameter that measures around 40.5mm at the bezel when using calipers and extending slightly over 38.5mm with that central case below. Lug to lug comes in at a very wearable 46.8mm with a thickness measuring at a reasonable 13.7mm, especially for an automatic chronograph. When factoring in all of these dimensions, there is no question that this is one of the most wearable Navitimer chronographs out there, wearing like a 40mm on the wrist. Case finishing is executed to a refined degree with stark faceted lugs, polished front surfaces that contrast with the brush case sides, including the pump pushers. Now the coin edge of the slide rule bezel does offer some polish, but this is a subtle departure from the overly blingy feel from the past Navitimers. In operation, the bezel rotates freely in both directions without any audible or tactile response, enabling the printed slide rule track to be rotated to work alongside the chronograph functions. The watch comes with just 30 meters of water resistance, which might be an issue for some buyers out there. Now set between broad 22mm lugs, the Navitimer leans into Breitling's distinctive 7-link bracelet design with brushed outer links and polished inner links that are screw adjusted. Tapering to 18 millimeters, the Navitimer bracelet culminates in a hidden dual deployant butterfly style clasp constructed from milled components that works well in practice while leaving room for a machined Breitling logo on the inner part of the clasp, just in case you forget what you're wearing for a moment. Given the style of the clasp here, there is no micro adjustment, but you do get 2 half links, one on each side. Across the front of the watch, we have a lightly domed sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating on both sides, keeping watch over the dial that is busy, but designed with utility in mind and being, of course, a Navitimer at the end of the day. Now, one of the most defining characteristics of the Navitimer has to be its recognizable dial layout that includes a slide rule internal bezel executed with black printing over a white background in both these examples, with the 60 and 10 indices printed in red. Just within the periphery of the central dial features another printed scale with minute markings set within. Tracking of the hours is handled with applied, polished, and faceted gold tone indices, each complete with a small helping of luminescent material at their outermost point. The sub-registers are in white, silver, and recessed slightly from the central surface, with the 3 o'clock register tracking 30 minutes, the 6 o'clock register providing 12-hour timing, as well as a color-matched date window, and we have a subsidiary small seconds at 9. Stylized baton hands in gold tone managed time telling, with a central chronograph seconds hand in contrasting red for easy legibility. As a note, the lume on the dial and hands does provide some help in the dark, but is not a strong attribute of this piece. Overall, this is one of the busier dial designs that has managed to stand the test of time, but each element here is intended for a specific aviation use case, and the effect is surprisingly not obnoxious and cluttered once you get used to it. And frankly, if it wasn't busy, it wouldn't be a Navitimer. Speaking to the use of color on these dials, we have a more matte silver, almost cream tone on one dial, with a striking mint green with a metallic sunray effect for the other. There are other dial variations within this collection as well, if neither of these are going to appeal to you directly, with some additional variety at each of the different sizes, offering some flair to the now 70-year-old framework. Turning the watch over and set beneath a sapphire exhibition caseback, we have Breitling's in-house chronograph caliber, the B01. Now, one of the biggest accomplishments from Breitling in the last, say, 20 or so years was the development of the B01 caliber, a movement that has become widely respected as being one of the most reliable Swiss luxury chronograph movements on the market. The B01 debuted in 2009 within the Chronomat before its introduction into the Navitimer family in 2011, and has since resided within additional lines such as the Premier and even the Black Bay Chrono after an exchange of movement tech with Tudor. In terms of its characteristics, the Breitling B01 is an in-house manufacturer vertical clutch operated column wheel chronograph with over 300 components. Like many other column wheel chronographs, operation of the pushers is very nice, very responsive and pleasing when it comes to that stop and start, providing a crispy and audible feedback. Now, speaking to the looks of this movement, I think this is a very attractive one at that. And then compared to some other versions and other models on the market that I've seen with the B01 in it, I just love how much the movement fills up the case. Now, the B01 is complete with a pleasant level of decoration in the form of laser engraving, Geneva striping across the bridges and the rotor, and a polished chronograph drivetrain and column wheel. This B01 I also noticed had a new finishing technique compared to previous versions that I have looked at in the past, with the skeletonized format of the rotor being one of the key characteristics of added refinement. Perhaps more importantly though, the B01 provides 70 hours of power reserve operating from a single barrel while still beating away at 28,800 vibrations per hour or 4 Hertz. And while it isn't shouted from the rooftops with this model, the B01 is COSC certified, which means this caliber has been certified to run between -4 to +6 seconds a day. We still tested both of these models across 5 different positions. The silver dial kept time at an impressive 0 to +2 seconds a day, with the mint green coming in at +1 to +4 seconds a day. Just to recap operation, 28,800 vibrations per hour, 4 Hertz. It does feature hacking and hand winding, as a power reserve, again, 70 hours. So now to unpack looking at these Breitling Navitimers. Now, personally, I'm really conflicted because if I look at these watches on my wrist and just my feeling towards them, I think they're beautiful watches. These are some of my favorite Breitlings that I've seen for my own personal ability to wear them. This is a watch that I would absolutely own. I like the look of these watches. The challenge is, for me, number one, when you just look at the facts, 41 millimeters, I think it's gonna wear smaller than that. I would say wears closer to a 40 millimeter case for a Navitimer. Not overly thick as well, short lug to lug, great design, finishing, this pop of color I think is fun. B01 movement on the inside, accuracy is there, looks are there. I think this is a really nice looking movement. But the number one thing for me is just where can this stack up in the market? Now, I think the competition for chronographs from the Swiss luxury segment under $10,000 is rather busy. And the other challenge with Breitling compared to other brands is they have exchanged their movement tech with other brands that they ultimately compete with. And I feel like Breitling didn't get the sweet end of the deal compared to Tudor. Tudor has run with the B01 and the Black Bay Chrono at around $5,300. And then you look at this watch, $9,000 with the same movement. Now it is going to get some different upgrades with the finishing techniques in this instance, but at the end of the day, it's still essentially the same movement. So I think that's the number one challenge with this watch. You literally have another brand utilizing your movement, putting in a watch that's 40% less or so. That's the challenge for me with this. And then you also have the Speedmaster Professional for around $6,400 starting price for the Hezolite. And as much as I love these colors, I do think it was a little bit weird how they made certain colors available at different sizes. But here's the good thing when it comes to Breitling and the Navitimer. Despite there being competition for the Navitimer and other options, if you just want maybe the best value for a luxury chronograph on the market, I think there are a lot of places to potentially look. That's one thing. But then you have the other question of the Navitimer. What is an alternative for the Navitimer that you can get for a more attainable price? There are some, of course. Some people mention like Zinn and their options, but at the end of the day, there's only one Navitimer. If there's a watch, or at least one of the watches in a short list that are worthy of the term icon, the Navitimer has to be it. This might not be a watch that you're going to stumble into and just, hey, I'm going to just get a Navitimer. But if you like a watch of this style, simply put, the Navitimer is the one to go for with its slide rule bezel, its approach to its register display, its over emphatic use of just aviation themes, and having true aviation history at its back. This is one of those watches that's very rare, where you look at it, you like the look, there's no other alternative that's going to give you the full piece of the pie that you're probably longing for. And with these new Navitimers, with these new case options, you have the old school Breitling wing logo at the 12. I just like the look of this, and I think Breitling in the last few years has done a nice job, and to see them grow from their market positioning and market share position, no surprise from me. This is a brand on the right track, and I think these are good expressions of that, despite, of course, being in a very busy world of chronographs in this luxury segment. But all right, guys, that is my take on these new Breitling Navitimer 41s. I think these are great looking watches, probably some of the cooler looking Breitlings that I have seen in the last few years that I would actually personally own. This and the B09, that pistachio dial, I think are my favorite models. The Premier is also cool, and then I also like the Super Ocean Heritage as well. So Breitling's on a good track right now. I think these are another good example of indicating this. So I'd love to see your comments down below. What are your take on these new Breitling Navitimers? Do you have a preference to what size? What do you think of these 41mm offerings if you have tried these on? I'd love to see some comments as well. Also, if you enjoyed this video, thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Really would appreciate that. Definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. Also, if you want to stay up to date with the content, 2 other great places to go. One will be on Instagram, see some great photos of watches in the process, and then also subscribe to our weekly newsletter. Have a great amount of written content coming every single week. Have a whole team dedicated to really writing some of the best definitive guides, stories in the watch industry, and trying to produce an extension of what we do here, but totally different than the video side of things. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I'll see you all very soon.